Ms. Chaitra, now over to you. You have 15 minutes for your presentation.
Hello.
Yeah.
Good morning, respected Miles sir and co-panelists, and also the academicians present here. Myself, Chaitra. I'm basically going to give a bird's eye view of India's role in the international climate change negotiations, given the 15 minutes time, which is not actually sufficient to conclude. So, to begin with, in my first slide.
Sorry for the interference. Since PowerPoint you send it to me, since you are speaking from mobile, not able to operate, you send it to me. Since I need to operate, you need to tell me which slide I have to go. So that's a major
So the
problem now.
second slide.
If you,
This is
can you able to operate from your end? Is it possible?
No, sir. It is
Okay.
not moving.
All right. So then I will try and do for you.
Yeah. The second.
Yeah.
This one. So here I've stated that climate change has emerged as an existential crisis of our contemporary times, basically because every individual, directly or indirectly, has been responsible for climate change and also been directly or indirectly a victim of climate change. Therefore, it is an existential crisis of the present times. And then it is a perennial issue, largely because it affects all spheres of life, energy security and food security, among others, in the sense we have long coastlines and then the melting glaciers and all the other issues which I wouldn't like to touch upon here, and because I'm largely looking into the negotiations and not just the climate change crisis. And then to address such common goods problem, international cooperation is essential. And then India, being one of the vocal proponents of multilateralism, has been a party to negotiations ever since the Stockholm Conference of 1972, the Rio Earth Summits of 1992 and 2012, and also the COP, that is the Conference of Parties to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, and particularly of the 2015 Paris Agreement. And then India has been a part of, as I already told you, the UNFCCC, then Kyoto Protocol, and the Paris Agreement, and has been lively in the international realm. So, can you move on to the next slide, please? Hello. And in this slide, I've put before the audience two approaches to India with regard to its climate change governance. The first one I've stated here is India has always been putting forward a normative approach, in the sense it is more of a value loaded agreement. I mean, argument saying that every individual, just like every individual, just every country also has equal right to and equal access to the resources available. And then India has been putting this on the forefront because India has not used its carbon space in a fair manner, just because we've been victims of colonialism and socioeconomic development is yet to take place. As such, this is our argument on the international forum. And here you have this concept of distributive justice, because when you look at intergenerational distribution of justice, it is largely about sustainable development. Sustainable development is, as you all know, to cater to the needs of the future generations. And then intra-generational distributive justice, when we look at it, is about the current socio-economic priorities of developing countries. So here what I would summarize is India has been looking into the value loaded argument of equity in terms of emphasizing its socio-economic development, and then the chief concern of poverty eradication. So now coming to the second point under the same, India has been emphasizing on the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities and respective capabilities. This came into the limelight in 1990 when the World Resources Institute of US pointed out that at international level, Indian agricultural sector has been responsible for the GHG rise, accounting for its methane emissions. And then in countering the argument, Indian scholars called Sunita Narayan and Anil Agarwal, they stated that ours is survival emission and not luxury emissions like the West, because agricultural emissions cannot be equated to that of any emissions coming from SUVs and their excessive use of ACs and refrigerators, etc. So here I have stated it like the survival emissions of the third world countries cannot be equated with the luxury emissions of the developed world. And then secondly, the other aspect is that the rich countries have been responsible for the increased global carbon emissions, mainly because they've already been industrialized. And in the course of industrialization, they've automatically used a larger share of their carbon space, much more than what was allocated to them. And then on the third front, I can just also put forward that the developed countries have been more equipped than the developing countries in terms of their expertise or finance and technology, as a result of which the responsibility on the part of the developed countries is more than the developing countries in mitigating climate change or reducing the carbon dioxide emissions. So India says that it is not willing to, put a cap on its emissions randomly. So can you move on to the next slide, please? Okay. And then coming to the second approach I've stated here is the third world approach of India, wherein the first and the most important one is the right to development. Just like I told you, our overriding concerns or the priorities have been poverty eradication and socioeconomic development. Basically, because even in 2019, the UN report says that 22% of Indians still live below poverty line. So that means that there is a need to improve on the socioeconomic development programs and reach the masses. And then India uses only 6% of the world's primary energy, though it has almost 18% of the world population, and its per capita energy consumption is meager of almost one third of the global average given its population once again. And then the next point I would highlight here is India asserts that it has a right to grow and emit, largely because of the concerns of Indian population. And then, like one of the recent reports says that India needs to quadruple its per capita energy production to meet the demands of the economy as well as its people, and also to attain the status of an upper middle economy. So here is my second point before you. And second aspect in the third world approach is India has transformed largely from being a victim to a proactive actor. Here I've just pointed out four of them among the others. The primary one being the Paris Treaty, like I told you, of 2015. India will be playing a decisive role in its effective implementation, largely because US has decided to back out of the treaty, and the vacuum created there is necessary felt that India could be filling it, largely because of India's growing stature in the international relations, particularly after in the Modi era, as you all know. And this I can add on by giving two instances. Firstly, of the International Solar Alliance, which was formed during the Paris Agreement, the Paris COP in 2015, which is a um, conclave of 121 nations within the Tropic of Cancer and Tropic of Capricorn. So it has all the solar energy rich nations, and it was an initiative by India and Indian Prime Minister Modi and Francois Hollande of France. And this has been a very important aspect, as it is one of the largest treaty of our times. And then coming to the another example is that of the mission innovation. India has is been a very important role, important part of the mission innovation, which is a conclave of about 22 countries which focus on clean energy. And India has been a model or a role example to the world in terms of renewable energy, which I will be touching upon shortly. And then coming into the last point, that is the sustainable development goals, which consist of 17 goals to be achieved by all the nations in the world, which has quantitative as well as qualitative goals. So by its effective implementation or achievement of the goals by 2030 will definitely need India to be playing a major role in it. So the next slide, please. Okay, the third point I've put here is the international forces have been increasingly influencing our domestic policy. See, our climate policy has emerged over time as a subset of our foreign policy. This can be viewed in the light of all the unilateral, multilateral agreements which Modi has been signing to whichever country he visits, particularly to the European Union nations, including Germany, or to African nations. Wherever he goes, you will have some or the other agreement or MOU related to climate change and renewable energy in particular. So this is one of the important point here. And then we've made remarkable achievements in our renewable energy sector. Like we say 175 gigawatts by 2022 shall be generated, and it is almost about to be a reality. And then there is another important pledge saying that by 2030, our total energy share shall come from the renewable energy sectors by almost 40%. So this is not a small thing. And then India's carbon sink has increased over time because as stated in the India forest report, it says like in 2013 our forest cover was 24.01% of the geographical area, which has raised to 24.39% by 2017, which is not a small thing. And then when we look at the ecologically sustainable socio-economic development policies part, there have been climate goals and the Millennium Development Goals, which have been succeeded by the Sustainable Development Goals. So Millennium Development Goals was emphasizing on ensuring environmental sustainability and in goal number 7. And Sustainable Development Goal in its goal number 13 laid emphasis to climate action. So the earlier government, the UPA regime, which was there in India, emphasized mostly on the Millennium Development Goals. I mean, carried forward it by implementing the socio-economic programs, including the Mahatma Gandhi Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme. And then when it came to the NDA regime, it has been implementing the Sustainable Development Goals. So every national policy related to socio-economic development in India has been influenced by international policies, is what I meant here. So could you move to the next slide, please? And one more thing I forgot to tell here, emphasize here is um, India's economic, sorry, India's carbon emission share is very less compared to the other emerging economies. Okay, so the previous slide. Hello. So the previous slide, sir. Okay, not this. So the previous slide where it says that India should balance emerging economy and not this, the previous one. Previous one, sir. The next one. No, next one. This one, sir. Hello. Yeah. Now, the fourth point I've stated is India needs to balance its stature as an emerging economy as well as a developing economy. So, as an emerging economy, it needs to look forward to enhance its industrial sector, etc., which will definitely call for an increase in the carbon dioxide emissions. But at the same time, just because of being a developing economy, it has certain restrictions as such in terms of finance and technology and the intellectual property rights issue. So the share of total global GHG emissions was just 7.26 for India in 2018. But our per capita emissions is the lowest among the emerging economies and also when compared to the developed world. So India has been looking into all the adaptation and the mitigation measures, probably the maximum possible from its side. So we need to streamline and centralize them. Like we have the National Action Plan on Climate Change, then subsequently we have the State Action Plans on Climate Change, which are meant to tackle the menace of global climate change at the national level, as well as to sensitize the local communities and the vulnerable communities, like be prepared for the disasters which may be a consequence of any form of climate change. So the next slide. Okay. And then India, one second. India has emerged from being a naysayer to a agenda setter, in the sense that earlier India would never be flexible. It would always be fixed into not agreeing to any of the commitments which are part of the international agreement negotiations. So one of the scholars called Raja Mohan uses a metaphor for India's shift as a transformation from being a porcupine to being a tiger. A porcupine, like I said, there will be no compromise for side payments, etc. Whereas being a tiger implies that India has been playing a dynamic role, and then it is in itself offering solutions and new ideas on the international forum. And then looking at the why agenda setter? First point is mainly because India has been um, making voluntary commitments since Copenhagen summit of 2009. At Copenhagen, it said by 2020 we would reduce our carbon emissions by 20 to 25% below 2005 emissions intensity of GDP by 2020. Again, in Paris at 2015, it said it raised the numbers from 20 to 25% to 33 to 35% below 2005 emissions intensity of GDP by 2030. And then India has an inbuilt long-term goal, which has been from the during the time from since the times of Manmohan Singh as the prime minister, and it focuses that per capita emissions of India shall never exceed those of the developed world, which itself is an acknowledgement of India's climate change concerns. And it doesn't mean like Indira Gandhi once stated in the Stockholm conference that being power, pro poor doesn't mean that you're anti environment, is what I would state here. And then looking into um, there is that option, carbon trading principle, which is going on between nations, and you have the clean development mechanism projects. India is looking at it as a um, business opportunity. Instead of denying in any kind of carbon trading, it is being a proactive role, playing a proactive role, and therefore it has been taking up lots of projects. It now stands at second only after China. And then another important contemporary issue I would emphasize here is India has been emphasizing on the use of indigenous knowledge and sustainable practices on the World Forum. In the Conference of Parties 21, India, Indian Prime Minister as well as the Minister of Environment, Forests and Climate Change has put forward two important ideas. One of Samanvay. Samanvay means it is a synthesis of the best available science as well as the appropriate traditional knowledge, which would be localized and indigenous one. And then they've released a catalog called Parampara, which basically reflects India's green consciousness, which has been innate to its culture. Like we have this use of reuse, recycle, and repair, which is a part of our culture. And then it is a wide acknowledgement of Gandhian slogan, as everybody knows, that the earth provides enough to satisfy man's needs, but not everyone's greed. So Gandhian philosophy plus the green consciousness within the culture are being put forward to the world, and it has been widely acknowledged. And then lastly, India has been looking into all the benefits of climate policy, particularly the ancillary benefits, which I've stated it as the co-benefits approach, mainly because we'll be looking into multiple development objectives, such as to state here an example, maybe when there is a modal shift towards public and non-motorized transport in cities, the intention could be carbon mitigation, but then it will have ancillary benefits or co-benefits, such as it could reduce the demand for automobiles, it could improve the access to transport of citizens with lower incomes and thereby reducing inequality in society. And then there could be a shift in the employment pattern. This could also reduce fuel import costs and thereon. So India in the international realm has changed from a reluctant player to an agenda setter of the times. And then the last one, India has emerged as a voice of the third world. From being a voice of the third world to that of adopting a multilateral approach. Initial years, like during the 1972 Stockholm Conference or the Earth Summit of 1992, India was largely associated with the groups like the Umbrella Group and the G79 group of 77 developing nations and underdeveloped nations. Now it has maybe after the LPG, the new economic policy of 1991, there have been shifts to being associated with or engaging with unilateral and multilateral agreements with the developed world, such as the countries of US, China, and the European Union, and then the like-minded OPEC nations. Today, India's strategy towards climate change has been on the basis of regional arrangements like IBSA, that is India, Brazil, South Africa, BRICS, that is Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, and BASIC, Brazil, South Africa, India, and China. And these organizations or the regional arrangements have been looking into climate change initiatives in a very serious manner. And then India has been funding the developing countries of Africa and small Indian island nations. So what I would like to put forward here is India, based on its national priorities and national interests, has been shifting its strategies, sometimes aligned towards the developing countries as a voice of the third world, sometimes aligning with the developed countries in order to seek climate finance or technology transfer expertise, and then also shouldering the concerns of the small island nations and the developing countries of Asia and Africa. So in order to conclude, India being the fifth largest economy and the fourth largest emitter of greenhouse gases, it needs to ensure a sustainable, inclusive, climate resilient development on a low carbon pathway in order to balance national priorities and also handle its environmental responsibilities as part of its international obligations. And in the wake of the pandemic, like ma'am said, COVID has come as a blessing in disguise. It is true to some extent here also I would like to put forward, because in the wake of the pandemic, carbon dioxide emissions of India has reduced by almost 1%. And with the emphasis on the green recovery in the post-COVID era, India's role is definitely going to be instrumental. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Chaitra.
Thank you,
on
sir.
the non-conventional or non-traditional security issues on the climate change, you have brought out 2 or 3 approaches how the countries, especially India, has been adapting. So first, I think you have highlighted about the normative approach, where you talked about the equal rights and equal access to resources is important. Also, the principle of common. Then you have highlighted the third world approach, where you said right to development and right to emit is also there, which is important for all the countries to adhere. And talked about the increasing influence of international force on domestic climate change policy. You have highlighted about the sustainable development goals, and also in the end talked about how India, being a third world country and now with the development, also still seen as a voice of the third world in the multilateral forums, having a multilateral approach on the climate change. So I think you have covered the approaches of the countries, especially India, and also given shift what is happening in terms of the climate change negotiations. Thank you, Ms. Chaitra.
Thank you so much, sir, for the opportunity.
You're welcome.